Hi everyone, thanks for stopping by my channel, and my name's Adrian and I'm here to show you how to build a urban-sized pond with an integrated biofilter marsh. So it should be pretty exciting, and I want you to come along on the adventure with me. So what I want to show you guys first is that I do indeed have a small urban yard. Those are my back steps. There's my excavated pond, a bit of a garden. You can see my fence, and it wraps around, and that's the extent of it. So anybody with a yard that size who wants to build a cool little pond with a biofilter marsh, that's what we're dealing with here. So we're just going to mosey on over here, and I'm not going to go into how to dig a pond because there's a zillion videos out there that talk about that. However, there is something really worth noting, and that is, while excavating, you need to save a good pile of dirt right next to it, because this dirt is going to go right back into the marsh side. Without that, you're not going to have a marsh. Now we're down in the excavated pond. We're facing where the marsh is going to go. So what you can see that I did is laid out a little bit of string at each corner. And what this does, it allows you to not only dig more easily and effectively, but you can set up your center line like so, and this will show you where the marsh is going to go. And this seems like a simple little thing, but it's actually very significant when digging. Another thing to mention is a little invention I just kind of came up with while digging is a sloped marsh base. So you can see that there's a pretty significant slope and then it hits bottom. This is to encourage the water while it's entering the marsh to percolate down and not just collect on a flat surface. You know, typically with ponds people will build steps, and we don't want water to stand too long. Now I'm going to stand up here on this raised area and look down into the pond area. And you can see that that's significantly deeper. It's about 3 feet. I dug it that deep so that raccoons can't reach down in there and grab my fish. If you live in a place without raccoons, it might not be necessary, but if you're in the western US, or frankly anywhere in the US and parts of Canada, you're probably going to have to deal with that. And here's just another view of the marsh area. My foot right there. And this spot right here at the very back is about 1.5 feet. And the reason for that is the marsh doesn't need to be 3 feet deep, because marsh plants don't have the deepest of root systems. So we'll get to that a little bit later, but just bear that in mind when looking at this. Purpose of a pond. So you guys may be asking yourselves what the purpose of a biofilter marsh is in a pond. Now, it's a really good question, of course, so I'm just going to go into that a little bit. A marsh is sort of like a natural filter for a body of water, and there's a lot on the internet. You can read all about it. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but just keep in mind that marsh plants will uptake nitrogen and phosphorus, heavy metals, and a myriad of other things that will typically befoul a pond and cause issues. So what usually people do is have an expensive pump system that has almost like a self-contained marsh within it, a large box filter that has bacteria cultures growing in it and algae cultures, and they sort of do in a mechanical roundabout way what a marsh does. I figure you might as well just have the marsh, which is pretty and it's fun and just all around pretty cool to have, and just make it part of my pond system. You know, why not? groove carved. Hey guys, here's the next important step to the process. What you see right there is a groove which has been carved right into the middle of the pond wall. So you can see there's the excavation, and I've laid down my underalignment halfway. Let me just hop down in here, show you a little bit more closely. So this is where the marsh separator is going to fit. Sorry about my shadow there. As you can see, it goes all the way through. And it's 5 feet across and 3 feet high. Next step will be laying the liner down inside of it and inserting the wall into there, which we're going to come to next. One thing I also want to show you guys is how to actually carve one of these grooves out. All I used was simple hand trowel, shovel like this, and it's a simple matter of kind of excavating here, dig it out. You get the idea. Add to the pile. Takes a little while, and it depends on what kind of soil you have. If you have sand like me, not such a big deal. If you have clay, might be a little bit more difficult. You may want to use a trenching tool. Marsh separator wall needs. Here is what you will need to build your marsh separator wall. I have it laid out. It's not actually put together yet. It's just kind of laying in the way it's going to end up looking. Let me just give you a quick run through of what this is composed of. So this frame here is vinyl. It's not wood, it's not metal. You need something that is going to last forever in the water and leach as little toxins in there as possible. You can buy this at a Home Depot or hardware store. I found mine in the roofing section. It's meant for roof awnings. It's a little bit flexible. It's not as rigid as wood or metal, but at this length it's not too bad. And it's very easy to saw, and it takes a nail very well. Next thing you're going to need is some poultry wire, poultry cage. So I had to buy 2 pieces because they're only 2 feet tall and I needed 3 feet. So there's going to be some overlap, which is fine. And try not to use galvanized because the zinc, of course, will leach into the water and cause potential health problems for the fish. So mine's coated with a vinyl also. Next thing you're going to need is some long screws. These are 4-inch screws. These are galvanized, however, only this part is going to be exposed, so I'm hoping that that's not going to cause any problems. But what's going to happen is I'm going to attach it here, and it's going to go into here, and that's what's going to hold the U-frame together. These are zip ties, short zip ties, and I'm going to use these to zip tie the overlapping parts of the poultry wire together. And these are roofing nails. They're short. You don't want to get long ones. And they come with this this cap, this plastic round cap. And the idea is when I nail these in through these gaps, this cap is going to hold very fast. It's going to keep the poultry wire from slipping over. I did a little experiment here where I nailed one in to see how this vinyl piece will take it, and it's really in there. It's not coming out. So it's going to work. Grand total cost-wise, I believe, was around $50. So not prohibitively expensive. Okay, so I put it all together. This is the finished product. And get up a little bit closer so you can kind of see how it all together. And it's pretty sturdy. It's a little bit dirty for me sticking it in the pond already to test it out. And another thing I added here is this screen here, door screen. And this is because I have really sandy soil, as I mentioned before, and I don't want it, going through these cracks, these gaps in the poultry wire. If you live in a place with more clayey soil, it might not be necessary, but it's just an extra $3–4, not a huge deal. I'm just going to zip tie it on one side to the poultry wire. And speaking of zip ties, another thing that's kind of worthwhile to note is the overlap between the poultry wire. Because this stuff's a little bit awkward to work with, it's hard to get it completely flat. You're going to have to fasten it and then zip tie it where the overlaps happen. And it works pretty well, especially if you have two people. One person pushes it really close, and you can pull the zip tie really hard and just make sure to clip off the tags. Works pretty well. It's sturdy and not going anywhere. And I also should mention that poultry wire obviously has metal that sticks out. It's not perfectly even when you get it out of the package, so you should get some kind of a snip, and you'll just have to go through and cut each one of these so they don't stick off, because you don't want that snagging your pond liner. It's a little bit annoying, but it doesn't take that long. And mine's pretty smooth. I don't think there's going to be any snags. Here's the next step. As you can see, the liner is in, and let me pan around over here. The marsh gate has been set into the grooves. Admittedly, this was not a very easy process. However, it is definitely possible. One thing to keep in mind is that if the gate sticks up a little bit too far, you can always trim the top off to make it work. Another thing to keep in mind is laying your pump tubing. So you want to lay that out, get it all squared away before you fill the marsh in with dirt. Otherwise, good luck with that. So all I did was took some snips, cut a small hole right there in the poultry wire, making sure to keep the sharp parts away from the liner, and pulled it through. Next step is going to be start filling this side with that dirt right there. So the pond has been filled now, as you can see. The liner's in, water's in. I even got some mosquito fish in there. And the marsh has been filled. And as I expected, the water from the pond percolated slowly into the marsh and filled up with it. It took about an hour, maybe hour and a half, to fill about 1,000 gallons. Also, the marsh gate, you can see it's a little different now than the last time you saw it. That's because the U-frame started to bow. So, learn from my mistakes and build a box frame. I had to do it in the marsh, or in the pond. Wasn't really too bad, but it was a little annoying. I essentially just replicated what I did at the bottom. I had to go buy 2 new screws and a little bit more of this awning. However, it's really strong now, and it's holding all the weight very well. It won't budge at all. So, if I were you and you're doing something, building something of a similar size to me, definitely do that before you put it in. I also want to show you how the screen is working. This screen door screen has done a great job holding in the sandy soil. I mean, the water clarity is pretty good. You can see right to the bottom. Granted, I did use a little bit of pond clarifier, but nothing's really eroding in there, even when I walk across the marsh. So it does work pretty well. I've also gotten the marsh plant started, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Those are cattails, which I harvested in the wild. I had a swamp and a marsh nearby that has thousands and thousands of them, so I hope they won't be missed. I doubt it. The reason I used cattails in the back is that cattails tend to get a little bit tall. They also have about a 6-inch root base, so their roots will reach down 6 inches into the substrate and draw nutrients from that point. Next step will be going right to the middle of the marsh, and I'm going to put bulrush there. And bulrush has a much deeper root base. It's going to go about 3 feet. And then at the very front, I'm going to do a small raised bed and put edibles in it. So I haven't decided exactly what. I'm thinking blueberries and things like that. Something that can handle the water and the alkaline. But you know, you can put whatever you want. Also, just sort of for a design and aesthetic standpoint, I'm going to be putting a bridge that's going to span right over this transition, so that the marsh gate won't be very visible unless you're kind of sitting looking right underneath the bridge. And you know, you can do that if you want. You don't really have to, it's not necessary. But once everything grows in, there'll be a significant amount of plants that have different root systems and nutrient requirements, and with all of them working in tandem, they should be replicating a natural marsh really well. So some time has passed now, and you can see the pond's come a long way. Got some of the decorative rocks and got my bridge built, all that fun stuff. And got some good marsh plants going on here. We have some different varieties of juncus and horsetail, and actually some decorative flowers, paper whites, daffodils, and some cattails that are growing in. There's the little fountain. So, a little history. I tried putting that bucket of gravel underneath the fountain or spring to catch the water coming in when I turned the pump on, and it kind of worked, but then it would overflow and started kind of eroding the marsh, which would of course flow right into the pond, and that's no good. So I came up with a new plan, and what I'm going to do is build a little kind of creek. It's going to go snake between those plants in the middle underneath the bridge, and that water is going to pour out into the pond. And this should still work exactly how I said it was going to, except with the added bonus of some serious rock or stone matrix filtration. So mechanical filtration, and also a matrix for algae and bacteria and all those goodies to live on and filter the water coming through. So I wanted to show it to you before I dug it out, and I'm going to take you along the process as I go, and I think it's going to work really well. First thing you gotta do to get the creek going is gotta do a little excavation. I tried to give it a little bit of a meander through the plants to look a little natural. It doesn't take too long, especially if the ground's wet. Just gonna get a little bit dirty, obviously. One thing to keep in mind though is you want to grade the excavation. So up here, where the water is going to pour in, you want it to be the highest point and gradually make it deeper and deeper until you get to the terminus. There's no easy way to do it perfectly, at least that I know of. So just go in there with your hand and, you know, dig more there and less and less and less until you get up to this point where you don't want to be too much below surface level. And, you know, if it doesn't work quite right, just pull up the rocks and, you know, dig some more until you make it work. Simple as that. What you're going to need to make the creek is some more of this window screen, which is turning out to be a pond and marsh builder's best friend. And that is to kind of put into the trench to keep the gravel and the rocks from, you know, just sinking and going away, which probably happen eventually. So make sure you have enough of that. You don't need a whole lot, but you need enough length to span the entirety of the creek. And over here are just some pond rocks that I bought actually at Home Depot. I think they were $5. Wash them off with a hose first, but you know, you can see they're just pretty good little creek looking rocks. And I recommend also getting some gravel. You can see over there I have the bucket of gravel seasoned in. There we go. So I'm going to lay that down first as a substrate and then put those rocks on top of the gravel to be a little more decorative. So I'm going to work on that, and that's what you're going to see next. Next step is cut the screening to fit into the trough, or the creek, proto-creek, and you know, trim it a little bit, and then you just gotta have to stick it in there with your hand, and that's all there is to that. So here we are with the rocks being laid down, and I have the pump running so you can kind of see how that works. And it's been going for about 10-15 minutes, no overflow, which means it is flowing correctly. I'll bring you in a little bit closer so you can actually get a visual on the flow rate down at the terminus. So you can see it's moving, which is great. And you know, it's gonna be a little cloudy for a while because I stirred up, you know, a lot of dirt doing this, but eventually it should equalize. And you can kind of see the murkiness expanding in the pond. I'm gonna have to put some pond clarifier to take care of that eventually. But it worked really well. Last step is going to be to trim the excess screen and tuck it under and hide it. And at that point it should be pretty much perfect. Here's the last part. You can see I tucked in the screen, and all I really had to do was just kind of just take it, stick it underneath the dirt and the rocks and just kind of cover it so it's still there. And if need be, I can actually, you know, pull it up and pull the rocks up. There was some trimming though. It was a little long, so I recommend using a razor blade and just kind of cutting it down to right around ground level, maybe leave about a ½ inch sticking up. But turned out well, pretty natural. And the last step for the marsh is to lay down a ground cover of watercress, which is going to go in all of these exposed areas you see between the large plants. And what that's going to do is just add a whole nother level of nutrient filtration. Plus it's usable, so it's pretty cool. Okay, so now it's been about 6 months since you've last seen the pond, and I'm really excited to show you guys what it's become, because it's really matured. So, drum roll. So you can see the marsh is completely grown in. It's a lot more full than last time you saw it, and all those water hyacinths have multiplied. I actually had to pull an ungodly amount of them out of there today, just so it didn't completely clog the pond. So let's head over here to the marsh. That is the focus of this, and let's try to hit all angles. It's even hard to get far enough back so you can see it all. I gotta back up as much as I can. But you can see that it is a veritable jungle. My cattails have grown to be about 10 feet tall, and all of the marsh plants have thrived. I'm trying to expand, but they're not gonna get out of this liner. So let's head over to the bridge and try to give you a shot of the creek in action, so you can kind of see the creek. Still in there somewhere. Try to part the Red Sea here. So you can still go and see it's still going strong. Everything's doing pretty well. The watercress did not work out, unfortunately. The slugs just made short work of them. And I just decided to say nix on the watercress and just go with marsh plants instead. I have a couple other things I want to show you guys that are slightly unrelated to building the marsh itself, but I think is a really cool part of having a balanced ecosystem. What I did was, let me just get over here and lift up this bridge. It's going to be a little bit hard to see because it is pretty dark, but right down in there, right at the, I guess the delta of this creek, I suspended a little basket, and in that basket is freshwater clams, which you can order off the internet. They're not very expensive. The species is Corbicula fluminae, also known as the Asian clam. I ordered 8, and I put them in the basket along with aquarium gravel, which is black, which is part of the reason you can't see it very well. I apologize for that. I'll try to get some pictures up, maybe some still photos, but as the water passes over them from the creek, they they filter feed all the water going over them, and so protozoa and bacteria, algae, all kinds of things are being devoured by those bivalves. And they, I believe, can process about 30 gallons per day. And I'm not sure how many liters that is for you metric people out there. You could probably do a simple conversion, but essentially my entire pond gets turned over by these clams every single week. So all of the water in the pond will pass through those clams in a week. So you can get an idea of the clarity improvements that I had once I put them in there, which is really cool. Just another little thing to add is I added some detritus feeders, so crayfish. Crayfish are great. Anything that falls to the bottom is rotting, whether it's a plant or animal, they will go after it. They're a little bit ornery and a little bit intrepid, so keep in mind that they will leave the pond and wander around a little bit. I found my crawdad, last time I saw him, he had walked out of the pond and walked down into my basement over there. So To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure if he's actually still in the pond. However, I like to believe he is. Also, I added a bluegill and a green sunfish. You can, add any fish you want. A pond this size with a biofilter like that could handle a pretty good load of fish. I don't particularly like koi myself. I like game fish, but it's kind of a good way to round out the ecosystem. You're going to get a lot of different bugs falling in there, things that would, under normal circumstances, without fish, just rot on the bottom. But they'll take care of that. So I've seen them eating wasps and night crawlers and moths, all kinds of things that fall in there. So, and it makes it more fun. They'll feed from worms that I pull out of my composter over there, which is pretty cool. And so I don't have to buy any pet food. And yeah, so that's it. It works pretty well. I wish I had some data on the actual chemical components of the pond water. I wish I could tell you the nitrogen and phosphorus levels. I don't have that yet. We'll see. Maybe I'll get that at some point. But so far, it's been very healthy. Everything's thriving. I have to pull plants out by the bushel. The fish are doing great. All the mosquito fish have bred. I think I'm in the 3rd generation of mosquito fish. There's tons of them now. And the sunfish seem to be leaving them alone, fortunately, so they're free to go about. They actually have a little nursery of them right in this area. Probably can't see because they're tiny, but there are a lot of them, and they're tiny little baby ones. So they've only ever known this pond. They were born here and raised here, and so were some of their parents. So it's kind of a cool idea. Anyway, that is the end of my video on how to do this, and I hope you like the results. I sure do. If you have any questions, leave them for me in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you.